Hello, my name is William Piriosi, and I'm a teacher at Oviedo High School. During the summer of 2016, I participated in a program that was a research experience for teachers at the University of Central Florida in partnership with their Center in Research and Computer Vision. While I was there, the grant, funded by the National Science Foundation, hoped to marry the concept of computer vision research with the studies that I was doing in advanced placement biology. In summary of the program that I experienced with the RET, I first started working with the Python programming language. So Python gave me the opportunity to understand what was really involved when it came to programming and coding these computer algorithms that the professors at the CRCV were working with. After I got a little basic understanding on that, definitely not proficient by any means, I met with Dr. Ulash Bakshi, the professor at UCF who is going to be working with for my project. His research focuses on lung cancer segmentation using computer algorithms. Basically, he can take a CT scan and his computer algorithm can automatically detect, without any assistance, whether there are lung cancer nodules within a CT image or not. First thing that I was tasked to do is first learn everything that I could about lung cancer. So I learned that lung cancer is the most preventable form of cancer that we know. Upwards of 87% of all lung cancer cases could have been prevented had the patient just not smoked. Also, I learned that lung cancer makes up almost a quarter of all current cancers. And with lung cancer being the second leading cause of death in the United States, that's a pretty significant statistic, especially when most of it is preventable. After I learned a little bit about the etiology of lung cancer, I then moved into understanding the whole segmentation side of it. So segmentation basically is you're taking an image and you're segmenting out useful components of that image that can be processed by a computer algorithm. So what I was doing was I downloaded a computer software program known as 3D Slicer. 3D Slicer uses similar foundations to what radiologists use when they are viewing CT images. What's different about this, though, is that it's open sourced. Because it's open sourced, researchers can write algorithms that can be used for various functions within the program itself. So my task was to first understand how to segment the nodules from CT images directly using that software. First I learned it manually, and then I learned it semi-automatically using the built-in algorithms from the program itself. Once I learned a lot about lung cancer, and then I learned a lot about 3D Slicer, I combined that into a 3-day lesson plan that I could use in my AP Biology course. So the first thing that I realized is that the AP curriculum requires me to teach the cell cycle and also use cancer as a model method of explaining the cell cycle. So I decided to marry the computer science aspect with the cell cycle and cancer aspect of my course. So the first thing I did was make a 1-day lesson on how lung cancer is detected, the causes, and then connected that to the computer vision side. The second day I had students getting into the lab using 3D Slicer in order to try and segment nodules on their own with a walk-through step-by-step procedure. The third day, in order to get them to really understand the usefulness and the shortcomings of being a doctor, whereas the positives of using a computer algorithm, I had them doing a patient-doctor role-play scenario where they actually were given real-life cases and patients had to act like they actually were feeling these symptoms and doctors had to act upon the information and knowledge that they were given. As you'll see in a series of slides, what I start with is first a lung cancer overview. So the first few slides are going over lung cancer etiology. The risk factors involved with lung cancer. Again, remember that over 87% of all known lung cancers are caused from smoking. So if we remove that, then we remove a significant number of patients being afflicted with the lung cancer disease. Next, I talk about the genetic aspects. Genetics are a really key portion of the AP Biology curriculum, especially signal transduction pathways. So failure in those pathways often leads to cancer, especially failure in the p53 pathway. Next, I start talking about how lung cancer is diagnosed. So as you can see from these slides, I'm talking about how lung cancers can be detected through chest x-rays or through MRIs or CT scans. And as we've learned through extensive research, CT scans are currently the best method of detecting lung cancer at the least cost, both monetarily and physically, to the patient. But once we have those images, the problem now goes to actually detecting whether these structures that we see within the lungs are cancerous or not. And doctors, we find out, just like any humans, can be a bit fallible. So they can be succumb to satisfaction of search, meaning that they see one little thing on this CT image that they focus their eye on, and that may not be cancerous, but this smaller little aspect down here actually was cancerous, but they never looked at it because they had the satisfaction of search on the previous structure. Also, there are various structures within inside the chest cavity that can naturally block areas that are high incidences of lung cancer, especially in the right upper quadrant in terms of the clavicle occluding it. After that, I show my students what segmentation is all about and the advantages of how lung cancer segmentation using an automatic computer algorithm can not only identify a nodule in the borders of it, often more effectively than a trained doctor, but can also do it much quicker than doctors currently can. Now that the students have a really good understanding of the causes of lung cancer and then the computer vision aspects of it, I really wanted them to get into the lab to really experience what it was all about. Now, unfortunately, my level of programming expertise is very, very low. So I wasn't able to really inundate the students with a lot of the Python coding that they may be experiencing if they do go into a field such as this one. But I was able to show them the graphical user interface that a physician might go into, especially when a lot of students taking AP biology tend to want to go into the medical field. So, in the second day of the lesson, as you can see from these slides, I go through and walk them step by step after a long and arduous ordeal of my own trying to teach myself 3D Slicer, of how to manually and semi-automatically segment lung cancer nodules, or nodules for that matter, within the lungs from CT images. Now, all of these images are provided from a national database to use for research purposes and educational resources as well. So once students really get to go through this, I'll be walking around the room, making sure that each team is really going at the right level and pacing that they should, and clicking on the right buttons and following the tutorial correctly. And the idea is that they will be able to segment that nodule both on a two-dimensional plane and then use the three-dimensional rendering abilities of 3D Slicer to make a 3D image so that they can characterize that nodule based on a certain set of known cancer-bearing characteristics, and then use that information to provide a real image to the patient. It's very easy for a doctor to just tell somebody something, but it's difficult for the patient to really understand it unless they see it themselves. So being able to show this 3D rendering of a mass inside somebody's lung is extremely powerful and convincing for a patient. So then in the third day of the lesson plan, I really wanted to immerse my students into real-life applications of computer vision and the medical field in regards to lung cancer. So what I did is divided my class into 6 groups, with each group being divided between a patient team and a doctor team. The patient team were my students who were just in the class mainly for the sake of learning, not particularly with strong interest for the medical field. Also, I tried to get people who could act quite well, so especially a lot of my drama students, I tried putting in the patient team. On the other hand, some of my students who worked really well with multiple resources and working on the fly, or those that could work well in conjunction with other people who were strong in that, or those also who were interested in the medical field, I put in the doctor role. because they had extensive amount of resources that they had to go through and manipulate on a scale of less than 20 minutes or so in order to make a critical diagnosis. Whereas the patient has a lot of background information that they get to come in with and are more prepared to do so. So once I had that, the students first started like a typical doctor-patient setup. The patient presented signs and symptoms. The doctor had to ask further questions in order to pry out some of that information. And the patients came in with these extensive medical profiles, knowing everything about their background story. The doctors, however, did not. They had a set level of questions that they had to ask. They knew that they were seeing somebody for a possible lung cancer diagnosis, and they had a whole bunch of different tables, as you can see from these slides and pictures, of how to diagnose it, but they were really working on the fly. So after that, the doctors and patients dialogued a bit. And I think almost every case, the recommended course of action was a CT scan based on low cost and first-time efforts. And then after that, the doctor teams conferred, segmented the nodule, then presented those nodule findings and their diagnoses to the patient. And the patient was then supposed to act accordingly to the diagnosis, whether it's relief for not having cancer or grief if they were diagnosed with cancer. And all the while, the students who were acting as doctors were meant to really embody the empathetic nature of doctors. After that, both teams reconvened and talked about and reflected how the lesson worked, how it connected to computer vision, how it impacts the medical field in the future, and basically areas of improvement that they thought would be necessary in the lesson plan. Overall, I found the students greatly enjoyed the lesson. They really enjoyed being able to get involved, to get their hands dirty, for lack of a better term, and actually experience what it's like to possibly be in the medical field despite only being 16, 17, and 18 years old. Not only that, they were extremely engaged throughout all 3 days of the lesson plan. Especially when students are constantly being inundated by PowerPoint presentations, I expected at least the first day to drag, but fortunately it didn't. They were asking a lot of questions, and I was actually kind of concerned that I wasn't going to be able to make it all the way through that intro lesson on the first day. Unfortunately, on my end, I realized that coding connections and the computer vision aspect was not as strong as I had liked. I think that goes back to the aspect of I'm not very strong in coding myself. Also, that I initiated this lesson on a 41-minute day period as opposed to a 50-minute day period. So had I started this on a Thursday, Friday, Monday sequence where I have full 50-minute periods, I might have had a greater chance of including more computer vision aspects. So in the future, hopefully I'll do that. I definitely came across a lot of challenges when it came to implementing this lesson that I did not foresee. So fortunately, I'm in constant collaboration with our computer tech person at our school. He was able to quickly install 3D Slicer on all 6 of my lab station computers, including my own. When I opened up 3D Slicer on all of them, they all worked. And so, based on that fact, I thought it was going to be okay to run. Unfortunately, what I didn't realize and what I should have done is that I should have actually walked through the tutorial on at least one of those student desktop computers and not simply left it to opening up the software to see if it worked. Because had I done that, I would have realized that the 3D rendering function is only available on 64-bit processors. Unfortunately, all 6 of my computers had 32-bit processors. So what we had to do is we had to scale back each of our 3D Slicer versions in order to make it usable for the students. And because of that, the 3D rendering aspect, which is really going to be the eye-catcher of the lesson, really failed because they weren't able to do that. Not only that, I really wish that I had had a stronger background in coding so that those students who did have possible interests, I could really connect with them better. Unfortunately, it didn't. So because I don't have that strong coding background, I could only direct them places rather than really connect with them. So I first want to begin by saying I'm extremely grateful for this program and this experience. Currently, our society is going towards a more automated and computer-centered focus, and having this background experience greatly comforts me in knowing what to expect for society in our future. However, in terms of this program, as a critical analysis, I think there are 3 things that could be improved to make this better for future teachers. The first one is providing a dedicated list of program materials at the beginning of the RET experience, so teachers understand first dates and secondly expectations of the program itself. So teachers often have a lot of free time over the summer, and with that free time they want to keep active, so they try and schedule events. And not having known dates and set in stone for a program as extensive like this makes it very difficult for teachers to plan. Next, it would also be beneficial for having increased direct coding instruction. So coding, there's many resources to learn on your own. But for some people who aren't as computer literate, it would be very, very helpful to have somebody, let's say like an undergraduate, walk through how to do some of the more basic principles of coding. Because there's still no replacement for having an instructor right there walking you through step-by-step in troubleshooting, as opposed to having a video that you keep sliding back and forth hoping, all right, maybe I got it, maybe I didn't. Totally understand that may be difficult for graduate students and professors to do, especially when their coding expertise is much higher, but maybe having an undergrad student involved in the lab would definitely help benefit the teachers involved. Lastly, having consistent communication would definitely be helpful. During my time in the RET, I've had 3 to 4 different graduate students in communication with me. Fortunately, they've been pretty straightforward, but there have been some times of lapses in communication, and having that constant change and turnover made it very difficult to plan, just like with the program materials above. I would like to thank you for watching my presentation about my experience in the University of Central Florida's RET program, sponsored by the Center for Research in Computer Vision and funded through a National Science Foundation grant. It was an incredibly rewarding experience, and I definitely feel that my students had an equally rewarding experience as well. So again, I want to thank you. Again, my name is William Furiosi, and I hope that you enjoyed my presentation.